I'm Allison, 34, and a marketing executive with an insatiable wanderlust. Ever since my first solo international trip to London 5 years ago, I've dreamed of exploring the ancient ruins of Greece. For 2 years, I saved every extra penny, researched the perfect itinerary, and finally booked my dream vacation. Then my sister Rebecca announced her Disney trip with her 3 kids on exactly the same dates. My family expected me to cancel my plans. For once in my life, I chose myself instead. The 2 months that followed tested every boundary I never had the courage to set. Before I dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from today. Drop your location in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe to hear more stories about learning to set boundaries with family. Have you ever had to choose between your dreams and family expectations? Let me know as we explore what happened when I finally stood my ground. My relationship with my family has always been close, but complicated. Growing up, the dynamic was clear. Rebecca was the golden child, and I was the reliable one who adjusted to everyone else's needs. My parents, Barbara and Richard, never explicitly said that Rebecca's desires took priority, but their actions spoke volumes. When we were teenagers, my parents canceled our family vacation to the beach because Rebecca made the cheerleading squad and had mandatory summer practice. When I graduated college with honors, my ceremony was barely acknowledged because it fell on the same weekend as Rebecca's baby shower for her first child. When our grandmother passed away, I was the one who handled all the funeral arrangements because Rebecca was too emotional to help. The pattern continued into adulthood. Last Christmas, I drove 6 hours through a snowstorm to be with family, only to discover the celebration had been moved up a day because it worked better for Rebecca's schedule. No one had bothered to tell me. When I arrived, exhausted and frustrated, my mother simply said, "Well, we assumed you'd be flexible since you don't have children to worry about." These weren't isolated incidents, but links in a long chain of expectations. As the single, childless sister, my time was considered less valuable, my plans more adjustable, and my needs secondary to those of my sister and her children. Meanwhile, my career in marketing had become increasingly demanding. As senior creative director at a major advertising agency, I regularly pulled 60-hour work weeks. For the past 3 years, I'd managed back-to-back campaigns for our biggest clients, taking minimal time off. The pressure had taken its toll: chronic insomnia, tension headaches, and a persistent feeling of burnout that no weekend could cure. During my annual physical, Dr. Thompson didn't mince words. "Your blood pressure is concerning for someone your age, Allison. Your cortisol levels are through the roof. If you don't make significant lifestyle changes, you're heading for serious health problems." The following week, Megan, our HR director, called me into her office. "You haven't taken a real vacation in 3 years, she pointed out, showing me my accumulated leave. "It's becoming a liability issue for the company. I'm making it mandatory that you take at least 2 weeks off before the end of the quarter." That evening, I pulled out the travel journal where I'd been collecting ideas for my someday trip to Greece. It was filled with magazine clippings, notes on historical sites, and recommendations from friends who had visited. This wasn't just any vacation. It represented something I'd been postponing for years while I handled everyone else's priorities. I spent weeks planning the perfect itinerary. I would begin in Athens, exploring the Acropolis and the ancient Agora. Then to Santorini for its breathtaking views and distinctive architecture. Finally, Crete to visit the Palace of Knossos and relax on some of the Mediterranean's most beautiful beaches. I booked small, family-run hotels, scheduled guided historical tours, and even started learning basic Greek phrases using an app on my phone. The total came to just over $5,000, including flights, accommodations, tours, and spending money. It represented countless overtime hours, skipped restaurant meals, and saying no to new clothes and other luxuries. I paid non-refundable deposits for special tours and accommodations, totaling almost $2,000. My best friend Samantha was the first person I told. I'm so proud of you, she said over coffee. You deserve this after everything you've put up with. And frankly, it's about time you did something just for yourself. With Samantha's encouragement, I decided to share my plans with my family at our regular Sunday dinner. I arrived at my parents' suburban home with a bottle of Greek wine and printouts of my itinerary. That sounds wonderful, honey, my mother said initially, though her enthusiasm seemed perfunctory. My father nodded absently, asking if I'd considered safety as a woman traveling alone. It was Rebecca's reaction that should have warned me. Her smile tightened almost imperceptibly as I described the sunset cruise in Santorini. She became suddenly preoccupied with wiping her youngest child's face. When I mentioned the dates, she exchanged a quick glance with our mother that I pretended not to notice. Well, good for you, she finally said. Though I can't imagine wanting to go somewhere so far away alone. I'd miss the kids too much. I drove home that night feeling lighter than I had in months. Little did I know that the storm was just gathering on the horizon. 1 week after I announced my Greece plans, my mother called insisting everyone gather for an impromptu family dinner. Rebecca has exciting news, she explained, her voice brimming with anticipation. That evening, we sat around my parents' dining table as Rebecca ceremoniously presented each of her children with Mickey Mouse ears. We're going to Disney World, she announced. Mark your calendars, everyone. May 15th through 29th, we're having the ultimate family adventure. The dates registered immediately. May 15th through 29th, exactly when I'd be in Greece. We've been planning this for months, Rebecca continued. The kids have been working so hard in school, and they've earned this reward. Plus, Mom and Dad have never experienced Disney with their grandchildren. My parents beamed with pride and excitement. My father raised his glass in a toast to making magical memories together as a family. No one acknowledged that these plans directly conflicted with my trip. No one asked if the overlap was an issue. The expectation hung unspoken in the air. Of course, I would change my plans. I was just one person. Rebecca had 3 children. The math was simple in their eyes. I remained quiet throughout dinner, processing the deliberate timing. This wasn't coincidence. This was a calculated move to ensure I would cancel my trip without them having to directly ask. The pressure campaign began that very night. My mother called at 11:30 p.m., her voice low and serious. I know you're excited about your trip, Allison, but surely you understand how important this Disney vacation is for the children, she said. Emma is struggling with her parents' divorce, and Jake and Lily have never been to Disney. Your father and I aren't getting any younger, and who knows how many chances we'll have for a full family vacation. Before I could respond, she added, Rebecca has already put down deposits. It would break the children's hearts if their aunt wasn't there. The next morning, my father called. Family traditions matter, Allison. When you were a child, would you have wanted your aunt to miss your special vacation? These are memories that last a lifetime. By afternoon, my phone was buzzing with messages from my nieces and nephew. Their words seemed oddly scripted. Aunt Allison, Disney won't be the same without you, and please come with us, we need you there. By evening, my Aunt Patricia and Uncle Robert had joined the chorus. Your sister needs your support, Aunt Patricia insisted. Single people have the luxury of flexibility. A group text chain formed that conspicuously excluded me. My cousin Laura, who had always been kind to me, discreetly forwarded some of the messages. The family was strategizing ways to make Allison see reason and stop her from being so selfish. Despite the mounting pressure, I attempted to find compromises. I called Rebecca directly and offered to fund a special pre-trip celebration for her children. I could take them to that new indoor water park the weekend before you leave, I suggested. And I'll bring back meaningful gifts from Greece for each of them. Maybe authentic Greek worry beads for Jake, who's been anxious about school, and a handmade ceramic piece for Emma, who loves art. Rebecca was unmoved. That's not the point, Allison. The point is being together as a family. The kids are counting on their aunt being there. I explained the financial reality. I had already paid nearly $2,000 in non-refundable deposits. Changing my plans now would mean losing that money entirely. That's the price of being part of a family, Rebecca replied coldly. Sometimes we have to sacrifice for the people we love. I proposed other alternatives. I could take the kids on a special weekend adventure after returning from Greece. I could FaceTime them from historical sites, giving them virtual tours of ancient ruins. I even offered to help finance part of their Disney trip as a consolation for my absence. Each suggestion was dismissed. The message became increasingly clear. Nothing would be acceptable except canceling my trip entirely. The situation reached its breaking point 2 weeks later. My mother invited me for what she described as just a casual family dinner. When I arrived, I found not only my immediate family, but also my grandparents, 2 aunts, an uncle, and several cousins. It wasn't a dinner, it was an intervention. We're all here because we're concerned about the choices you're making, my mother began, her tone reminiscent of how she'd addressed my teenage rebellion phase. Family should come first, and your decision to abandon us during this important vacation has us worried about your priorities. One by one, family members took turns explaining why my absence would ruin the Disney experience. My grandmother expressed disappointment that I would choose ancient rocks over flesh and blood. My aunt suggested that perhaps I was going through something that made me unable to recognize my family obligations. Throughout it all, Rebecca sat with tears streaming down her face, the perfect picture of the wounded sister. When her turn came, her voice broke as she said, "I just don't understand how you could be so selfish. My children will be devastated." As I looked around the room at the faces of people I'd spent my life trying to please, I felt something inside me shift. I was being cornered, manipulated, and shamed for wanting 2 weeks of my life to myself after years of putting everyone else first. In that moment, surrounded by disapproving family members, I realized this wasn't really about Disney World at all. It was about control. It was about maintaining the family dynamic where my needs would always come second to everyone else's. And for the first time, I wasn't willing to accept that role. The morning after the family intervention, I met Samantha at our favorite cafe. The weight of my family's expectations felt crushing, and I needed perspective from someone who wasn't entangled in the drama. "This is textbook emotional manipulation," Samantha said after I recounted the previous night's events. "They ambushed you with an audience to maximize pressure and minimize your ability to defend yourself." Samantha shared her own experience setting boundaries with her mother, who had expected her to be available for weekly shopping trips despite her demanding medical residency schedule. "The first time I said no, you would have thought I'd committed a cardinal sin," she recalled. "But after holding my ground through the guilt trips and passive-aggressive comments, she finally adjusted." "The thing is," Samantha continued, stirring her coffee thoughtfully, "this isn't really about Disney World. If Rebecca had genuinely wanted you there, she would have checked your availability before booking. This is about maintaining the status quo where you're expected to accommodate everyone else." Later that day, I confided in my colleague Jessica during our lunch break. To my surprise, she immediately recognized the pattern. "My older sister pulls the same stunts," Jessica said. "She scheduled her wedding on my college graduation weekend, then acted shocked when I was upset. These people count on you feeling too guilty to advocate for yourself." Their perspectives helped me see this situation more clearly. This was a pattern that would continue indefinitely unless I took a stand. The following evening, I had an emergency session with my therapist, Dr. Margaret, whom I'd been seeing intermittently for anxiety management. I hadn't scheduled a visit in months, but she made time when I explained the situation. "What we're seeing is a family system that's resistant to change, Dr. Margaret explained. "You've been cast in a supporting role, and your decision to step out of that role threatens the entire family dynamic." We spent the hour analyzing the manipulative tactics my family had employed: guilt-inducing language, public shaming, emotional blackmail, and using the children as pawns. Dr. Margaret helped me recognize these as hallmarks of narcissistic family systems. Let's role-play how you might respond in different scenarios, she suggested. We practiced calm, firm responses to various guilt trips and accusations. She taught me phrases like, "I understand you're disappointed, but my decision is final, and I love you, but I need you to respect my choice." Remember, Dr. Margaret emphasized, their reaction to your boundaries isn't your responsibility. Your job is simply to set and maintain those boundaries with consistency and compassion. That night, I did something I'd never done before. I pulled out my journal and wrote a list of all the times I'd sacrificed my own needs for my family. It filled 3 pages. Then I calculated the emotional cost of always putting others first, deteriorating health, postponed dreams, and a growing resentment that was poisoning my relationships with people I loved. The next morning, I woke early and sat in my small apartment balcony with a cup of tea. As the sun rose, casting long shadows across the city, I felt a clarity I hadn't experienced in years. I knew what I needed to do, and for once, I felt confident in my decision. I texted my parents, "I need to speak with you and Rebecca. I'll come over at 7 p.m. tonight." When I arrived at my parents' house that evening, Rebecca was already there, sitting primly on the couch beside our mother. My father stood by the fireplace, arms crossed defensively. The tension in the room was palpable. I had prepared what I wanted to say, practicing with Dr. Margaret's guidance. I took a deep breath and began speaking in a calm, measured tone. "I love you all very much, and I value our family," I started. "But I will not be canceling my trip to Greece. I've put down non-refundable deposits, taken approved leave from work, and spent 2 years planning this vacation. My decision is final." The reaction was immediate and explosive. My mother gasped as if I'd physically struck her. "After everything we've done for you," she said, her voice trembling with emotion. "This is how you repay us? By abandoning your family when we need you." My father's face flushed red with anger. "If you go through with this, don't expect us to be here when you get back," he threatened. "You're making a choice, and choices have consequences." Rebecca's reaction was the most visceral. "You've always been jealous of my children," she accused, her voice rising. "You're nothing but a selfish child hater who can't stand to see others happy." I remained calm despite the onslaught, remembering Dr. Margaret's advice to detach emotionally from their reactions. "I'm sorry you feel that way," I replied, "but my decision stands. I hope you all have a wonderful time at Disney World, and I look forward to hearing about it when I return." As I turned to leave, Rebecca snatched her phone from the coffee table. "Everyone is going to know how you've treated us," she hissed, already typing furiously. "I'm posting this on Facebook right now." By the time I reached my car, my phone was buzzing with notifications. Rebecca had indeed taken the conflict public, posting a tearful selfie with the caption, "Heartbroken that some people choose vacations over family. Please pray for my children who just learned their aunt values Greek islands more than their happiness." Comments flooded in from extended family and mutual friends, most expressing shock and disapproval at my apparent selfishness. Aunt Patricia went so far as to suggest I seek professional help for my inability to connect with family. Driving home, I made a decision that would shape the next 2 months of my life. I would limit contact with my family until they could respect my boundaries. I wouldn't engage in social media warfare or try to defend myself against their attacks. Instead, I would focus on preparing for my trip and protecting my mental health. I sent a brief message to my parents and Rebecca. "I love you all, but I need space from this conflict. I'll be limiting my communication until after my trip. I hope we can reconnect then with mutual respect." Then I muted their notifications on my phone and began counting down the days to Greece. The morning of my departure arrived with a mixture of emotions I hadn't anticipated. As I zipped my carefully packed suitcase, I felt an exhilarating sense of freedom mingled with a persistent undercurrent of guilt. Despite weeks of therapy and preparation, decades of family conditioning couldn't be undone overnight. My phone, which I had unmuted for practical purposes, pinged repeatedly during my Uber ride to the airport. My mother had sent a final barrage. "I pray you don't regret this selfish choice. Your father's blood pressure is through the roof because of your behavior." Rebecca had to explain to the children why their aunt doesn't love them enough to be there. My sister's message was the most cutting. "Hope those ruins are worth ruining your relationship with your family. The kids made you a Disney card, but I told them not to bother sending it." With trembling fingers, I made a decision. I blocked their numbers, just temporarily. This was my moment, and I deserved to experience it without constant emotional sabotage. The magnitude of what I was doing hit me as I checked in for my flight. I excused myself to the airport bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and experienced a full-blown panic attack. My heart raced, my vision tunneled, and I couldn't catch my breath. Years of people-pleasing had conditioned me to believe that standing up for myself was wrong, dangerous even. As I struggled to breathe, an elderly woman in the next stall noticed my distress. "Honey, are you all right?" she called over. When I emerged, still shaking, she introduced herself as Eleanor and sat with me on a bench outside the restrooms. Without prying for details, she shared her own story of leaving an emotionally abusive husband at age 50 after decades of putting everyone else first. "The guilt nearly crushed me," Eleanor confided. "But 3 years later, I can tell you it was the best decision I ever made." Sometimes the hardest choices are the ones that save us. Her kindness steadied me. By the time they called my flight, I felt grounded in my decision once more. The moment my plane touched down in Athens, something shifted inside me. The air was different here, perfumed with orange blossoms and sea salt. The light had a golden quality that made everything look slightly magical. As I stepped out of the airport into the Mediterranean sunshine, I felt the weight of family expectations begin to slip from my shoulders. My first morning, I stood before the Parthenon as the early light bathed the ancient marble in a honeyed glow. Tears welled in my eyes at the beauty and history surrounding me. Carlos, my tour guide, noticed my emotion. "The Greeks believed in catharsis," he explained gently. "The purification of emotions through art and beauty. Perhaps that is happening for you now." Over the following days, I experienced Athens with all my senses. I ran my fingers over marble columns that had stood for thousands of years. I tasted olive oil so fresh it made me reconsider everything I thought I knew about food. I listened to local musicians play traditional bouzouki in small tavernas where the ouzo flowed freely and strangers became friends. In Santorini, I met Sophia, a Canadian photographer traveling alone after her own family conflict. We bonded immediately over our shared experiences and spent 3 days exploring the island together, photographing the famous blue domes at sunrise and sharing life stories over glasses of crisp local wine. My mother didn't speak to me for 6 months when I decided to become a photographer instead of a nurse, Sophia confided as we watched the sunset from a cliffside cafe in OA. But eventually she saw how happy I was and came around. Sometimes people need time to adjust when you change the rules of the relationship. In Crete, I spent mornings exploring the ancient palace of Knossos and afternoons swimming in crystal-clear coves accessible only by foot. I kept a detailed journal, documenting not just what I saw but how I felt, lighter, more authentic, increasingly comfortable in my own skin. Meanwhile, according to my cousin Laura's occasional updates, the Disney trip was proceeding with my family firmly committed to the narrative that I had abandoned them. Rebecca posted daily photos with captions like "Complete family fun at the Magic Kingdom" and "So blessed by the family members who chose to be here." My parents told mutual friends that I was having some kind of breakdown and had cut contact with the family without explanation. The story circulating was that they were deeply worried about my mental health and praying for my return to reason. Laura sent screenshots of Rebecca's most pointed social media posts. The children wearing matching Mickey ears with the caption, "Who needs a selfish aunt when you have so much love right here?" My mother commenting, "Family is about showing up." Some people never learn that lesson. Though the messages stung, they no longer had the power to devastate me. Something about being thousands of miles away, surrounded by structures that had witnessed centuries of human drama far greater than mine, put things in perspective. By the time I boarded my flight home 2 weeks later, I felt transformed. I had conquered my fear of dining alone, navigated foreign transportation systems, made friends across language barriers, and stood firm in my choice despite enormous pressure to cave. I returned with hundreds of photographs, a journal full of reflections, and a quiet confidence I'd never possessed before. The contrast between sun-drenched Greece and the cold reality waiting at home was stark. My apartment felt smaller and darker than I remembered. My inbox contained wedding photos from a cousin's ceremony I hadn't known about, clearly sent to emphasize my exclusion. Rebecca had messaged on Instagram, where I hadn't blocked her. The kids were devastated you missed their Disney parade. Mom hasn't been sleeping because she's so heartbroken by your behavior. I hope your selfishness was worth it. There was complete silence from my parents. No welcome home text. No inquiry about my safe return. The message was clear. I was being punished for my defiance. Despite the chill of homecoming, I unpacked my suitcase with deliberate care, arranging my Greek souvenirs on shelves and pinning new photos to my wall. This trip represented more than a vacation. It was the first time I had honored my own needs despite crushing opposition. I was determined not to let their coldness diminish that achievement. As I settled back into work the following Monday, colleagues remarked on my tan and relaxed demeanor. Greece must have agreed with you, my boss noted. You look 10 years younger. What no one could see was the resolve that had solidified within me. I would not return to the family dynamic that had dominated my life for 3 decades. The wall of silence between us was painful, but it was also an opportunity to establish new patterns of interaction built on mutual respect rather than one-sided accommodation. I decided to maintain the distance they had created, not out of spite, but as a boundary necessary for my well-being. I would not reach out with apologies or explanations. I would not plead for re-entry into their good graces. Instead, I would wait until they were ready to engage with me as an adult with valid needs and choices of my own. This stance wasn't easy to maintain. Years of conditioning had taught me to be the peacemaker, to smooth over conflicts even at my own expense. But Greece had shown me another way to exist, and I wasn't willing to surrender that newfound freedom to resume my old role. So began 2 months of limited contact, during which I would learn more about myself, my family, and the true meaning of healthy relationships than I had in the previous 34 years combined. The first Sunday after my return, the absence of family dinner felt strange and liberating simultaneously. Instead of driving to my parents' suburb, I took myself to a local farmer's market, then spent the afternoon reading in the park. This simple act of reclaiming my time felt revolutionary. I established new routines to fill the space left by family obligations. Tuesday evenings became standing dinner dates with Samantha. Thursday nights I enrolled in a photography class inspired by my time in Greece. Weekends, once dominated by family events, became opportunities for exploration and self-discovery. My approach to family communication was deliberate. I didn't block anyone, but I muted notifications and checked messages on my own schedule. I responded briefly and pleasantly to direct questions, but ignored guilt trips and accusations. When Rebecca sent a lengthy paragraph about how the children cried over my absence, I simply replied, "I hope you all had a wonderful vacation." The photos looked fun. This measured response appeared to frustrate my family more than anger or defensiveness would have. They had no idea how to respond to this new Allison who acknowledged their feelings without being controlled by them. Meanwhile, I channeled my energy into work and personal growth. I pitched a major campaign inspired by Greek aesthetics that our biggest client immediately approved. I reorganized my apartment, donating items that no longer served me and creating a meditation corner with souvenirs from my trip. 3 weeks after my return, I found a new apartment in a vibrant neighborhood closer to downtown. The move wasn't just practical, It was symbolic. New space, new beginnings, new patterns. My support network proved invaluable during this time. Samantha checked in daily, offering encouragement when my resolve wavered. My colleague Jessica, who had navigated similar family dynamics, became a close friend and weekend exploring partner. I continued regular sessions with Dr. Margaret, processing both my transformative trip and the ongoing family estrangement. What you're experiencing is the extinction burst, she explained. When a pattern of behavior stops working, people often intensify their efforts before eventually accepting the change. Your family is still in the intensification phase. True to Dr. Margaret's prediction, my family's tactics escalated as their silent treatment failed to bring me back in line. My mother began sending cryptic messages about her health. Just came from the doctor. The stress isn't helping my condition. But don't worry about me. When I called, concerned, she was deliberately vague, suggesting that my situation was contributing to her unspecified ailments. My father tried financial leverage, calling about a family emergency that turned out to be a discussion about possibly removing me from their will. Actions have consequences, he said. We need to protect the family legacy. Rebecca employed the children as emotional messengers. My 9-year-old niece Emma called, clearly reciting a prepared speech. Mommy says you're choosing to stay away from us because you're mad. Are you mad at me, Aunt Allison? It took all my strength to reassure her of my love while not falling into the manipulation trap. Aunt Patricia showed up unannounced at my new apartment, ostensibly to check if you're okay, but really to report back to the family and apply in-person pressure. Everyone is suffering because of this rift you've created, she informed me. Is your pride really worth tearing the family apart? Early holiday planning became another pressure point. Though it was only July, my mother sent a group text about Thanksgiving arrangements, noting pointedly that family members who want to be included should confirm now. Throughout these challenges, I found myself growing stronger and more certain of my path. The photography class introduced me to Michael, a landscape architect with kind eyes and a quiet confidence I found immediately attractive. Our friendship evolved naturally into something more, and I discovered the joy of a relationship built on mutual respect rather than obligation or control. I planned weekend trips exploring local attractions I'd never made time for, hiking in nearby state parks, visiting small-town art festivals, taking a sailing lesson on the lake. These adventures helped me recognize how much of my life I'd placed on hold while accommodating others' priorities. The most surprising development was my reconnection with old friends whom I'd neglected during years of family-centric living. My college roommate Madison was now living just 30 minutes away, and we rekindled our friendship over wine and shared memories. My childhood friend Tyler invited me to join his book club, introducing me to a diverse group of thoughtful individuals who valued my perspectives. Journaling became a daily practice where I documented not just events, but insights and patterns I was noticing in myself and others. Today, I said no to covering Jennifer's shift without feeling guilty, I wrote one evening. Small victory, but significant progress. 7 weeks into this new normal, an embossed envelope arrived in my mailbox. Inside was an invitation to my parents' 35th anniversary celebration, scheduled for the following month. The invitation itself was neutral, but enclosed was a handwritten note from my mother. Your presence would mean everything to us. Your absence would be noted by everyone who matters. Later that day, Laura called to deliver what amounted to an ultimatum. Aunt Barbara asked me to check if you're coming, she said uncomfortably. She wanted me to tell you that this is your opportunity to rejoin the family. She said if you miss this, they'll take it as your final decision about wanting to be part of the family going forward. The invitation presented a critical decision point. Would I maintain my distance at the cost of potential permanent estrangement? Or would I attend and risk falling back into old patterns? As the anniversary approached, I realized this confrontation might be necessary for true resolution, whatever form that took. My time in Greece had taught me that some ruins couldn't be restored to their original form, but could be appreciated and respected in their transformed state. Perhaps the same was true of family relationships. The old dynamic was irreparably altered, but something new and healthier might be built in its place if we were all willing to see each other clearly. With that perspective in mind, I decided to attend the anniversary celebration, not as a capitulation, but as an opportunity to establish the new terms of our relationship face to face. In the week leading up to my parents' anniversary party, I prepared myself both practically and emotionally. Dr. Margaret and I spent a full session strategizing how to handle potential scenarios, from public confrontations to private guilt trips. "Remember, you're not responsible for managing their emotions," she reminded me. "You're only responsible for communicating your boundaries with clarity and respect." We practice responses to likely provocations. "I understand you're still upset, but I'm not willing to discuss that today. I'm here to celebrate your anniversary, not to revisit old conflicts. I love you, and I also need you to respect my choices." The evening before the party, I carefully selected my outfit, a knee-length navy dress I'd purchased in Santorini. It was elegant, but also symbolic, a physical reminder of the strength I'd discovered on my journey. I paired it with my grandmother's pearl earrings, honoring family tradition while standing in my new confidence. Michael offered to accompany me for moral support, but I declined. "This is something I need to do alone," I explained. "But knowing you're waiting to hear how it went means everything." Samantha helped me establish an exit strategy. If things became too tense, I would text her a simple SOS, and she would call with a fabricated emergency requiring my immediate attention. As I drove to the upscale restaurant where the celebration would be held, I practiced deep breathing techniques Dr. Margaret had taught me. "You face the Aegean Sea during a storm," I reminded myself. "You can face your family for one evening." The tension was palpable the moment I entered the private dining room. Conversations paused briefly as heads turned toward me. My mother, resplendent in silver, offered a tight smile but made no move to greet me. Rebecca, standing nearby with a glass of champagne, deliberately turned her back. The children, however, had no such reservations. Emma spotted me immediately and ran over, wrapping her arms around my waist. "Aunt Allison, I missed you. Did you bring me something from Greece?" Her genuine affection pierced the artificial chill, reminding me why family relationships were worth the effort of reconstruction. I hugged her back and promised to bring her Greek gift the next time I saw her. I made my way through the room, exchanging pleasantries with extended family members. The reactions were divided. Some were warmly welcoming, others coolly polite, and a few, particularly Aunt Patricia, overtly hostile. I strategically positioned myself at a table with my cousins Laura and Daniel, who had remained neutral during the conflict. We chatted about work and their children, carefully avoiding mention of the family rift. This small island of normalcy helped steady me for the confrontations I knew were coming. Halfway through the evening, as servers cleared the main course plates, my father approached my table. His expression was unreadable as he asked, "Could I have a word with you?" In private. He led me to a small alcove off the main dining room. I braced myself for recrimination, but his opening surprised me. "You look well," he said awkwardly. "That trip must have been good for you." Before I could respond, he continued, "Look, I'm not good at this sort of thing. Your mother and we may have been unfair to you. Not just about the vacation, but for a long time before that." His admission stunned me into silence. My father had never acknowledged any unfairness in my treatment before. "The thing is," he went on, studying his hands, "Rebecca has always been louder about her needs. More demanding. You were always so capable, so independent. I guess we took advantage of that." My mother appeared beside him, her expression a complex mixture of emotions. "Is everything all right?" she asked, eyeing us both warily. My father nodded. "I was just telling Allison that we might owe her an apology." My mother's posture stiffened. We never meant to make you feel less important, she said carefully. But family is about compromise, and you've always been so good at that. That's just it, Mom, I replied, finding my voice. I've always been the one compromising. When has Rebecca ever been asked to adjust her plans for me? When have my needs been given equal weight to hers? My mother started to object, then paused, a flicker of recognition crossing her face. I suppose, when you put it that way. I love you both, I continued. And I value our family. But I need to be treated as an equal adult, not as an accessory to Rebecca's life or a built-in babysitter or someone whose time matters less because I don't have children. Can you understand that? A heavy silence followed, broken by my father's deep sigh. We haven't been fair to you, he finally admitted. And I'm sorry for threatening you about the will. That was beneath me. My mother nodded slowly. We've taken you for granted, she acknowledged. I can't promise we'll change overnight, but we can try to do better. This conversation, years in the making, was interrupted by a sharp intake of breath. We turned to find Rebecca standing at the entrance to the alcove, her face flushed with emotion. So now I'm the villain, she demanded, stepping into our circle. You're turning them against me? No one's turning against anyone, my father said firmly. We're just acknowledging that we haven't always been fair to your sister. Rebecca turned to me, tears brimming in her eyes. You have no idea what it's like, she said, her voice breaking. You get to travel whenever you want. You have a career, freedom, no one depending on you for everything. Do you know what I would give for 2 weeks alone, doing whatever I wanted? Her raw honesty caught me off guard. This wasn't the manipulative Rebecca I'd expected. This was my sister exposing a vulnerability I'd never recognized. Rebecca, I didn't know you felt that way, I said softly. But making me cancel my plans wouldn't have given you the freedom you're craving. I know, she admitted, wiping away a tear. It was petty and jealous. I saw you planning this amazing trip, and I just snapped. I've been drowning in responsibilities, and instead of being happy for you, I wanted to drag you into the deep end with me. We moved our conversation to a quiet table in the corner, away from curious eyes. For the first time in years, perhaps ever, Rebecca and I had an honest conversation about our lives, our jealousies, and our shared history of competing for parental attention. I've always envied your freedom, she confessed. But I never considered that you might envy aspects of my life too. I do sometimes, I admitted. The built-in support system, the clear purpose, the unconditional love from your children. But we've made different choices, and both paths have their challenges. By the time dessert was served, we had reached no perfect resolution, but a new understanding had begun to take root. My parents acknowledged their favoritism, though years of established patterns wouldn't change overnight. Rebecca and I recognized our mutual envy and the ways it had poisoned our relationship. What happens now? My mother asked as the party began to wind down. Now we try something new, I suggested. We acknowledge that I have the right to make my own choices, even when they don't align with family plans. We respect each other's different life paths. And maybe we consider family therapy to help us establish healthier patterns. To my surprise, they agreed, tentatively but sincerely. As I drove home that night, I felt neither triumphant nor defeated, but something more nuanced. Cautiously hopeful that from these honest conversations, a more authentic family connection might eventually emerge. The weeks following my parents' anniversary party brought subtle but significant shifts in our family dynamic. The changes weren't dramatic or instantaneous. Decades of established patterns don't disappear overnight. But small adjustments signaled the beginning of a healthier relationship. My mother began calling once a week, but unlike before, she respected my boundaries when I couldn't talk. I just wanted to check in, she'd say. Call me back when you have time. No guilt, no pressure, just simple connection. My father, traditionally reserved with his emotions, made an effort to show interest in my life. He asked questions about my marketing campaigns and actually listened to the answers. When I mentioned a challenging client presentation, he followed up the next week to ask how it had gone. These small acknowledgments of my professional life felt revolutionary. Rebecca struggled the most with our new boundaries. Years of having her needs prioritized had created deep-rooted expectations. There were lapses, scheduling conflicts where she assumed I would adjust, passive-aggressive comments when I couldn't attend a last-minute event. But when I gently held my ground, she made visible efforts to check her entitlement. I was going to ask if you could take Emma to her dance recital Saturday since we have Jake's soccer tournament, she said during one phone call. But I realized that's assuming your time is less valuable than ours. So instead, I'm asking if you'd like to attend her recital. She'd love to have you there, but I understand if you have other plans. The simple recognition that my time deserved respect meant more than she could know. Extended family members gradually adjusted to our new normal. Some, like Aunt Patricia, remained cool and disapproving. Others, particularly my younger cousins, expressed private support for my boundary setting, seeing it as inspiration for their own family challenges. Most importantly, my relationships with Rebecca's children evolved in positive ways. Without the pressure to be constantly available, I found myself genuinely wanting to spend quality time with them. I took Emma to an art museum where we spent hours discussing colors and shapes, connecting in a way that wasn't possible during chaotic family gatherings. One rainy afternoon, Rebecca and I met for coffee while the kids were in school. Our conversation drifted to the pressures of motherhood, and for the first time, she spoke honestly about her struggles. Sometimes I feel like I'm drowning, she confessed. Between the kids' activities, Mark's limited involvement since the divorce, and everyone's expectations of what a good mother should be, there are days I can barely breathe. That sounds incredibly difficult, I acknowledged. And I haven't always been understanding of those pressures, and I haven't respected your choices, she admitted. I've been so caught up in my own chaos that I resented your freedom instead of celebrating it with you. This new honesty between us was tender and tentative, but it felt more authentic than the polite fiction we'd maintained for years. My father surprised me most. During a weekend visit to help him set up a new computer, he asked about my Greece photos. As I scrolled through images of ancient temples and azure seas, he asked thoughtful questions about the history and culture. You know, he said as we looked at a sunset shot from Santorini, I regret never traveling more when I was younger. Always thought there would be time later, but work and responsibilities kept piling up. He paused, studying the photograph. I'm glad you didn't make the same mistake. My mother began taking an interest in my photography hobby, even suggesting we take a beginner's class together. I've always wanted to learn, she admitted. And it would give us something to do together that's just for us. 6 weeks after the anniversary party, we had our first family meal that didn't vibrate with underlying tension. We gathered at a restaurant rather than my parents' home, neutral territory that helped maintain our new boundaries. The conversation flowed naturally, touching on work, hobbies, current events, and family news without the power struggles that had previously dominated our interactions. As fall approached, I surprised everyone, including myself, by suggesting a weekend trip to the lake house for the extended family. My planning, my terms, I clarified. A long weekend in October when the leaves are changing. No pressure to participate in every activity, and everyone respects each other's space. Their response was telling. Instead of immediate demands for date changes or activity adjustments, they accepted the invitation on my terms. Rebecca even asked if she should arrange childcare for certain evenings so the adults could have dinner without interruption. The kids can absolutely come, I assured her. But I appreciate you considering different needs instead of assuming everyone wants the same experience. As I prepared for this future gathering, I reflected on how far we had come in a relatively short time. The journey hadn't been easy. There had been painful confrontations, tears, and moments when reconciliation seemed impossible. But through it all, I had discovered something invaluable, my own worth beyond family roles and others' expectations. My relationship with Michael continued to flourish, built on mutual respect and healthy boundaries from the beginning. He accompanied me to several family events, providing both support and an outside perspective that helped maintain our new dynamic. I shared what I'd learned with friends facing similar struggles. When my colleague Jessica agonized over setting boundaries with her domineering mother, I offered both empathy and practical strategies. The guilt is real, I acknowledged. But so is the freedom on the other side. The most profound change was internal. I no longer felt responsible for everyone else's happiness at the expense of my own. I had learned that true love requires mutual respect, that family connections should enhance rather than diminish individual growth, and that setting boundaries isn't selfish but necessary for authentic relationships. My Greek vacation had given me more than beautiful photographs and memories. It had catalyzed a transformation that rippled through every aspect of my life. Standing firm in that airport, despite panic and guilt, had been the first step toward reclaiming my autonomy and reconstructing my family relationships on healthier terms. As I finalized plans for our upcoming family weekend, I realized that the most important lesson wasn't about saying no to others, but saying yes to myself. Love shouldn't require self-erasure. Family shouldn't demand self-sacrifice. The strongest connections are those that honor individual needs alongside collective ones. The journey continues, with occasional setbacks and old patterns resurfacing during times of stress. But now we have a language for discussing these dynamics and a shared commitment to creating something healthier than what came before. I sometimes think about Eleanor, the woman who steadied me during my airport panic attack. "The hardest choices are the ones that save us," she had said. In choosing myself that day, I had not only saved my own well-being but ultimately offered my family the opportunity for more authentic connection based on mutual respect rather than obligation and control. That, perhaps, was the most unexpected gift of all. I'd love to hear about your experiences with family boundaries. Have you ever had to choose between your own needs and family expectations? How did you handle it, and what was the outcome? Please share your stories in the comments below. If this resonated with you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories about navigating complex family dynamics. Remember, setting healthy boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for authentic relationships. Thank you for listening to my journey, and I wish you courage on your own path toward healthier connections with those you love.